A different perspective, a new insight into life, a nugget of positivity and a hidden truth, and maybe an amusement for you. Welcome to From My Standpoint, a twice-a-month podcast with your host, Josh C. Jones.
Can we? Might we? Could we? Will we? Hey, I appreciate you tuning in again to From My Standpoint. I'm your host, Josh C. Jones. If this is your first time listening, then I thank you for tuning in. And if it's not, well, thank you for coming back. I really do appreciate it. And do not forget that if you prefer to read, I suggest you check out the show notes at FromTheirStandpoint.com. That's from THEIR standpoint.com, where I will sometimes add links and some extra information, maybe, that might not be in the podcast. So let's get to this. Can we? Might we? Could we? Will we? Well, I don't quite know, but I will explain my thoughts on this. Also, if you haven't yet listened to it, listen to From My Standpoint podcast episode 2, Focused or Blinded, Who is the Enemy? All right, so let's get back into this one here. In the years prior to 2021, you might even say in the decade prior or so, we witnessed a major shift in the thinking of America and the thinking of Americans. Well, it was planted long ago, as was all movements and ideas. There were drastic changes in our education system, changes that were implemented with gradual baby steps for a long time, but changes that grew alongside the generation taught.
Was this right or wrong?
Well, what would that depend on, random voice of questions?
Your foundation, right?
Yes. As I write in my book, Volume 1, The Foundation to Your Success, our foundation is the soil in which all we do and achieve and pass on to the next generation is planted, grown, and harvested.
And as you say, your character will be the chameleon with which your children and the next generation might very well emulate, because it is what you have chosen to allow to cultivate.
Yep. It's when them folk are young, they begin to develop them own ideas of morals and fairness and them acceptable behaviors by what them adult folk guide them by.
Yep, that is true, random voice of common sense. And what we adults and those we authorize to teach our kids what we authorize them to and what we teach them is so important to the future of society, culture, and sovereignty, and not to mention, our kids' own lives. Anyway, as I was saying, there were ripples in our history, seismic shifts that fractured the foundation of a once great nation, an unintended consequence of liberty. When free thinking and free speech, a dichotomy created by rights and allowed to entice, are exploited to lay siege. Then we shape with the stone the tortuous ripple by a sophist embedded and planted so miffed, tossed to disrupt and enthrone, to fundamentally change, to remove and reshape and remake and retrace, and make one estrange.
That sounded like a good poem, but what did it mean?
It was just some thoughts, random voice of questions. But anyway, sometimes I wonder, as I watch people in news, politics, and social media and education, well, everywhere really, can we ever make this country, the country that I love, the greatest country to ever exist in the world, the United States of America, can we ever make this country great again?
Can't we build back better?
Well, sure, random voice of questions, but really, to build back better means that the thing you're building back was greatly damaged, if not destroyed. Besides, what would we be building back to, and what constitutes as better? This is for a different conversation, and maybe it goes alongside, who knows, what some people are saying. I think maybe it'll go alongside it of 2 episodes that were already made that are just waiting for their day to be released, and those are capitalism and socialism.
Wouldn't that be the same with the question, can we ever make this country great again?
Probably, depending on, what you define as not great. But anyway, let me get back to this random voice of questions. People's actions, they have made me question this before. Can we ever make this country great again? The division tactics that we so readily and eagerly grab onto and run with like it's a baton in a relay race, a race in which one can be so openly segregated from their fellow runners and yet still run so freely alongside the other runners and reach their own finish line. The division tactics in which we worship when called upon by Nebuchadnezzar, so we ourselves will not be tossed into the mouth of the canceling fiery furnace. And the division tactics in which we boldly close our eyes and bow to avoid being woke by the golden calf. That is the outrage and violence toward fellow neighbors, the burning of one's home community, the selective amnesia of history and facts when purging, the pile of selected works whose residue remains as ash to be blown away with the sands of time. Now, it has been stated that, and again, I just want to remind you all that most of these shows were written in 2020, but it has been stated and referred to that the current state of America is garbage, that America was never that great, and that there is something fundamentally immoral and wrong with America. Now, what I find interesting is that the people who state these things seem to be, I guess, trying to pit blame and segregate blame, I guess you'd say, on one section of people. And no surprise, it's solely on the generalized population that may be holding different political views. And that's kind of what I'm trying to get at here.
Why do people think we must all have one conscience and that any views that may differ are garbage, wrong, or racist, or worth the use of and spreading of hate and violence?
I honestly don't know, random voice of questions. My best answer, if I must give one, is that hate and evil come in all forms, in all colors, and in all groups. And that oftentimes we are fighting a spiritual battle. But I wonder if we might be able to see good in another who holds differing views or belongs to a differing party. And that brings me to Make America Great Again. Make America Great Again. Now, this phrase has been stated as racist, homophobic, bigoted, white nationalist, idealistic, and a deplorable slogan, among other names, that only those who are intolerant, hate-filled, radical, terroristic, white supremacist, Uncle Toms, sellouts, ignorant fools would utter or support or wear such apparel.
Why do you bring this up? What's the point of this?
Always there with the questions, random voice of questions. Thank you, but trust me, I am going somewhere with this. Just trust me. Now, MAGA. In some people's minds, MAGA stands for oppression and censorship. They believe it stands for hate and intolerance. They believe it stands for the destruction of the Constitution and freedoms we have here in America. They believe it stands for prejudice and immorality. And that is why intolerance, censorship, hate, violence, racism, oppression, discrimination, prejudice, and, well, kind of repeat it, but with a more unwanted term, bigotry, have become more and more socially, culturally, and morally acceptable in America today. Now, this slogan was, as far as I could determine, it was intended to inspire accountability and change for self, change for communities, change for our culture, and change for America.
So, why is wanting your own country to be great so deplorable?
That is a very, very good question, Random Voice of Questions.
Is that not what each political party is espousing to their voters? To help them to increase their economy and personal wealth? To provide security? To increase opportunity? To preserve their idea of liberty? And, to make America great?
I'm just going to move on. Well, I sometimes wonder if that is truly what some people want. I sometimes question if the actions and words spoken by some are not to make America great, but to make America equal with all the world. That is to bring America down a few pegs so that no one nation will be greater than any other. And if that is true, then that's fine. Okay. We are all allowed the freedom to hold differing opinions, beliefs, and express them in this country.
If one is not honest about their intentions, then it implies the means justifies the ends.
That is a good point there, Random Voice of Questions. That is a really good point. Now, when this happens, it sends a clear message that truth, honesty, morality, ethics, freedom, liberty, tolerance, and love are non-essential components compared to the implementation and completion of a certain vision. That being that, our country is not built upon truth, honesty, morality, ethics, freedom, liberty, tolerance, love, etc., but instead built upon by whatever is required for one person or one group or one political ideology to remain supreme and hold the governing power over all. And yet, I do think that most people had some similar thoughts for what this slogan of "Make America Great Again" might have meant. That being equality. A tricky topic indeed, if not properly explained, and that is a topic I discuss in my book, Volume 2, Your Foundation in Action. And to continue that, it's a good economy, a strong protection for the citizens, and overall to make America a place for the safety, security, and prosperity for all living here, for all the legal American citizens. To make America great. And then we come to yes, we can. Yes, we can. In some people's minds stands for oppression and censorship. They believe it stands for hate and intolerance. They believe it stands for the destruction of the Constitution and freedoms we have here in America. They believe it stands for prejudice and immorality. Now, this slogan, as far as I could determine, as far as I could understand, again, this slogan was intended to inspire personal responsibility. And that personal responsibility was touted as change for self, change for communities, change for our culture, change for our society, and change for America.
What type of change?
Well, that's a fantastic question, Random Voice of Questions. Unfortunately, this change was rarely explained in detail. However, it did inspire some of the people to stand up and fight for their perception of change in order to make America great again. Though, as is the case with most slogans, the meaning can be somewhat ambiguous and personalized to each individual. Meaning, the goals of each, whether they agree with the person using the slogan or not, might not be the same. Yet, I do think that most people had some similar thoughts for what this slogan might have meant, and that being of equality. And once again, that is a tricky topic indeed if not properly explained, and it is a topic I discuss in my book, Volume 2, Your Foundation in Action. Yep. And to continue that, a good economy, a strong protection for the legal citizens, and overall, to make America a place for the safety, security, and prosperity of all living there, all living here. to make America great. So, whether someone agrees with or disagrees with a certain politician or political party's idea, in part or in whole, that should not deem the demoralization, violence, hate, oppression, cancellation, and immorality shown by some toward a supposed common goal held in a single phrase of either, "Yes, we can," or "Make America Great Again," or any other single phrase for that matter. Because we are one. We are one. We are American. Sure, each of us, we have our own ancestral background. Be African, Asian, Hispanic, Irish, Scottish, German, Australian, etc. But in the end, we are American. We are either American or we are not American.
Yep. When folks say Asian, that is no more specific than them classifying all folk of a lighter skin as one ethnical heritage. Like folk can't tell them folk from them countries apart. It is also as if folk can't be them turn African American and be white. Some folk are from Africa, It may not be accepted in folk in society, but I don't know. It's just silly to me. Yep.
I'm moving on. And if we are American, then we want prosperity and happiness and freedom and liberty and success for ourselves and our family and our country, right? In other words, we want to make America great. Because if not, then we should either not be here, or we should realize that our reflection might be a problem. Sadly, though, it would seem that we are falling and failing as a peaceful, loving, helpful, ethical, moral, honest, and tolerant American society. Because demoralizing, oppressing, segregating, forcing segregation or self-segregation, whatever, burning, canceling, and falsely using generalizations to label all based on a phrase inspired to help the country we all call home, that is what the previous quotes should be speaking of as ignorant garbage, and a big part of what is fundamentally immoral and wrong with America. As terrible as this is what some people seem to keep doing and supporting.
Resistance is futile.
Yeah, sometimes you feel that way. But we should not beat ourselves up for falling. No, we should not. Because we are human and we all will fall into this trap. Each one of us, we will fall into this trap at some point in time in our life. What we should do is realize this concept and help each other up when we do fall. Now, here is something that you might hear me repeat many times. I've written it many times before, taken it out. I've added it to other ones. You'll probably hear me say this many times, especially when it comes to political topics. We should not expect those whom we elect to represent us to change if we are unwilling to change. I'm going to say that again. We should not expect those whom we elect to represent us to change if we are unwilling to change. That is, as long as we, the people, are generalizing, hating, oppressing, attacking, canceling, burning, being hypocritical, segregating ourselves, and refusing to get up from our fall and change to repent, we should not expect those at the top whom we elected to represent us to get up and change and repent. Remember, they were elected to represent us, like a reflection in the mirror represents the original image. Now, it may just be a saying, well, as is all other sayings really, but if one chooses to listen to the wisdom in it, its meaning still holds true. And that is, united we stand, divided we fall. However, I still think that if we stop, do our own independent research, think, and realize that most of us love and care for our country. Our veterans, our first responders, our teachers, our founding, our Constitution, our liberties and freedoms, for each other, and are desiring the same ultimate end goal of a strong, successful, flourishing, protected, sovereign land of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, a free America with God-given inalienable rights, then together, yeah, I really do. I really do. Together, I believe that, yes, we can make America great again. So don't forget to check out the other great shows at www.fromtheirstandpoint.com. That's www.fromtheirstandpoint.com. And if you've even slightly liked what you've heard in these podcasts and episodes, please, please, please rate, review, and share. And if you have not yet subscribed, then I encourage you to subscribe to From My Standpoint to ensure you receive a reminder when new episodes are released. You can follow me on Facebook at FM Standpoint, on Instagram at From My Standpoint, or visit the website www.fromtheirstandpoint.com. That's from THEIR standpoint.com, and click on my show, From My Standpoint. And now, what you've all been waiting for, it's the wisdom of Dad Joke. I am speaking to my fellow citizens when I say we are all Americans. We are all Americans. We may fight each other over silly things and for random reasons, as some, family does. But we are all as American as apple pie, or as baseball, or as hot dogs, whatever you wish to throw in there. We are all human, and we will all falter sometimes. We are not perfect. Newsflash, we are not perfect. But if we can open our eyes to view things from another perspective, do our own independent research, seek the truth rather than comforting deceit, and stop being so single-minded and always on the defensive, then we can be like a factory that sells passable products, and at least be satisfactory.
This has been From My Standpoint, a podcast to find a nugget of positivity and a hidden truth, encouraging and enlightening insight, entertaining a new perspective, and providing an amusement for you. We hope you were entertained, encouraged, enlightened, and enjoyed the show.